We are going to be jumping into threat trends uncovered. I know that threat trends is always a huge and popular topic. So super excited to be joined today by dun, da, 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 the lovely, the wonderful Monique Bardawil. She is the Director of Professional Services here at Field Effect. She's a cybersecurity leader with 18 years of experience in the security and intelligence community, and she's expertly positioned to assist clients in their journey to improve resilience against cyber attacks. So thank you so much for joining us today, and can't wait to see what you have in store.
Yeah, nice to have everybody here, and I kind of look forward to this and then the discussions and the Q&A after. But we'll maybe just dive in and kind of talk about, what we're going to mention today. All right, here we go. So the main thing we're going to talk a bit about cyber threats, really focusing on what we saw last year, what we're seeing kind of come out this year into Q1, and then some we're going to talk about risk reduction and what it means as we look into these cyber threats. So we'll dive right in. What I'm going to be presenting today is really cyber threats that all organizations see, and there's a couple things and a couple ideas that I want you to keep in mind as we go through these. One, from a cybersecurity perspective, we cannot stop threat attempts. Threat actors, cyber criminals are always going to be attempting because they want to kind of achieve their malicious objectives, and we can't stop kind of cyber threats from occurring, but we are going to stop them from impacting us as organizations. We're going to establish cybersecurity monitoring, having controls in place to stop a threat actor from taking advantage of any of our networks. So organizations really, our key kind of goal is to detect, react, and prevent the impact of cyber threats. So as we look into kind of 2024, what we're seeing here and what I'm going to talk about is cyber threats and trends that continue to impact us, impact our clients, what we're seeing in kind of cybersecurity space, and what we're seeing from both an incident response. So when organizations reach out to us and they've had cybersecurity incidents, and also what we're seeing kind of threat actors trying to attempt against our own MDR clients, and where we are working to block these types of attacks. So it's really kind of looking at the commonalities, and also in terms of the market, what we've seen impact partners in terms of providers, what we've seen impact clients, and also kind of to help people who are interested in kind of our prospects and looking into what does a cybersecurity solution mean to me. So as we walk through this, keep in mind that cyber threat actors or cyber criminals do not discriminate. They don't discriminate whether you're a small organization, a large organization, whether you're in a certain sector or not. They're really looking for what I would say is kind of the quickest way to achieve their goals, which is kind of how do they financially gain, how do they benefit their own financial gains, and how do they do that in the easiest way. So they are looking for, I'll say, the lowest hanging fruit to be able to achieve that. And then whether you're a small or large organization, these trends that we're going to talk about, I think, are of concern no matter what. So with that, and we're going to talk about three main threats that we saw last year, and that I think organizations will continue to face. So one that always happens, and this doesn't matter, this is kind of where the human is the the main impact, is business email compromises. So business email compromises is a term that we use when an email account is compromised. And really it's kind of used, what we see threat actors, their objective can be one of two. The first one would be, and what we saw quite a bit of it, is that they're using the compromised account to conduct more phishing campaigns. So the way these commence is usually the user would receive, or kind of an unsuspected user would receive an email that looks legitimate, and allures them or kind of triggers them to click on a link, redirects them to a website. They enter their credentials, and then the threat actors gains access to those credentials. This is not new. The key aspect that we're highlighting here, this continues to be used, and this continues to be a good way for threat actors to, kind of improve their financial gains. So the main aspect in the first category that we saw quite a bit of, and we're continuing to see a lot of, is that when an account is compromised, it is then used by threat actors to then enable more phishing campaigns. So in doing so, a threat actor would use my contact list to send a phishing email. So everybody in my contact list, or everybody that I may have sent emails to, and as a result, kind of continue to spread and increase their credential harvesting campaigns. In many cases, some of these threat actors may use those credentials to then do something more malicious, or they can sell those accesses off. We do not know, but that is something that we do see quite a bit. The second category, and I'll say the category that is has a more focus in terms of financial fraud, is the ability where threat actors gains access to accounts, sits on the account for about 2 weeks, monitors, sees what kind of email exchanges are happening between the compromised account user and other parties, and then inserts themselves into an email exchange dealing with financial transactions. So typically in those aspects, threat actors will go after accounts that are used by finance teams or by senior people within an organization, especially when we're talking about a small business where it could be one person doing 3 jobs, right, within that. So in doing so, they're inserting themselves into that conversation, and they're trying to convince either parties that to make a payment to the threat actor accounts. So if they compromise me and I'm invoicing a client, they're going to convince that client that, hold on, Monique's financial information changed, and as a result, can transfer the money that you owe Monique to my bank account. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of that financial fraud being committed. So that is not new. This has been happening for years and continues to happen. But there are some things that kind of happened in 2025 that make this, we're seeing advances or changes in threat actors' techniques. So what we're seeing more of is the ability to bypass MFA. So while MFA continues, and everybody will continue to say, like, we should always have MFA on all of our accounts because it's a strong deterrent for the threat actors from gaining access to accounts, cyber criminals are always continuously trying to figure out ways to bypass those controls. And what we saw from an incident response perspective last year is a threat actor would conduct what we call an adversary in the middle attack, where they sit between the victim and the legitimate service, so the legitimate email service. A threat actor would present the victim with what looks like a legitimate login page. And in many cases, we saw login pages that look exactly like the organization. So if it had a logo for the organization, it would have the same logo. So they're able to replicate that and present it to the victim. As a result, the victim unknowingly provides their credentials. So in doing so, they would capture the credentials to authenticate to the legitimate service, and then they would present the victim with an MFA prompt. So again, for me as a victim, if I get an MFA prompt, I'm going to enter the MFA. And as a result, once they get that kind of MFA prompt, now they're sitting between us and the legitimate service, and they're able to take action and kind of log in. And then once they get that, then they would steal the web session cookie and use that to continuously authenticate. This is where we're seeing more of that happen, and really emphasizes to the users, like, it's, how do we detect this? Makes it difficult. And, we'll talk about protective measurements in a bit. The other aspect that we continue to see is that the bypass of user detection. So I'll say, a threat actor, once they gain access to a mailbox, they'll, monitor it for a couple of weeks to identify an email exchange they can insert themselves into. And as a result, they, again, this is not new, is that we continue to see the use of inbox rules to hide communications where the threat actor is impersonating the legitimate user or the legitimate owner of that mailbox to then convince the other party to commit to kind of to change the financial payment. One of the new things that we saw more of this year is also the threat actors are taking advantage of what is kind of what some of the services offers, application consent. In those cases, in Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, you can configure the service to allow me as a user to approve an application to gain access to my mailbox. In what we saw happen this year is threat actors were taking advantage of that. And as they have authenticated to my account, they can then enable that. So we saw that with a lot of EM client being leveraged as an application that a threat actor would allow, set up to have through application consent. This allows a threat actor to kind of have another way to access the account. And so there is a bit of more of a persistent access to the account that they could use if required. And certainly when those types of applications are set up, those applications have access to everything that the mailbox would have. It could be from calendar to contact list to obviously the emails that exist. So we continue to see this. And I think, we always say the human plays a critical role in the cybersecurity chain and in terms of protective mechanisms. And what we need to focus on from an organization perspective and cybersecurity providers perspective is user education and user awareness. So how do we better enhance their knowledge, letting them know of what are some of the things that the threat actors are taking advantage of? How are these threats evolving? And just to continually reiterate to users the fact that humans are one of the weakest links in that cybersecurity chain. From a business process, I think what we saw quite a bit of is that sometimes business processes block or catch the financial fraud. So for instance, if me as a company have a process in place that if a client asks me or if a provider asks me to change that they've, changed their financial information, that I would call them to verify that that was them. So those are some things that we can do from a business process perspective. And we know from incident response perspective, from some of the cases we handled, is that's when sometimes the incident is caught, is when the business process catches the fraud. So that's just something to keep in mind in terms of cybersecurity. While it does focus on technology, processes, and people play an important part. And a couple of technical controls that I think are important for us to look at is restrict non-admin account permissions. So if I'm a non-admin account user, then kind of look at that permissions that we have that we give our users and kind of review that and see how we can improve it. But also, if we are going to, we need something like application consent because that's part of different processes that potentially even requiring administrators to provide that consent. So having a process in place where we don't completely prevent users from allowing applications to access certain information, but kind of ensuring that it goes through the right vetting and technical approvals to ensure it is legitimate. So with that, I'm going to move to threat 2. So threat 2 is exposed services. And what we see a lot of and continue to see a lot of is remote desktop protocol and password brute force attacks. So exposed services continue to continue to be a way that threat actors take advantage of and able to gain access to networks. So we saw quite a bit of that in 2024 in terms of incident response when victims would call us, they've been compromised, and they're asking us to, one, provide investigative services and cybersecurity monitoring services through MDR. So we also see attempts of brute force attacks via our own MDR monitoring, where threat actors are trying to brute force, systems or passwords to be able to gain access to systems. What we saw a lot of, where things kind of get really messy, is threat actors are trying to brute force attacks, including admin accounts, to then remotely connect via an admin protocol like remote desktop, in order to, gain high privileged access to a system right away, right? So if I'm able to guess the administrator password, then I'm able to gain access to that system with highly privileged account already. And once I do that, then really once I have that, then I have quite a lot of freedom within the network to be able to move around to critical systems, to be able to identify file servers or important information that then I could use to exfiltrate and kind of move on. I want to highlight another challenge that we saw from an incident response perspective. It was sometimes difficult for us to confirm that a brute force attack occurred. And that is because in some cases, organizations are not logging the appropriate authentication events or the failure events. So for us to really confirm whether a brute force attack occurred, we need to see successive attempts, and then that are failing, and then we're going to see a success. And that is important to note, is that for us to be able to help clients and better understand the types of attack, we need that data and that information. So that's just something to keep in mind as we're talking about how do we get better at detecting and stopping, is we need to have the right mechanisms to detect, and that is really down to the logging and what types of events are we logging. I think we all also, I just want to kind of talk a bit about RDP. We all realize that remote desktop and other remote administration tools are required, right, for organizations to really remotely administer systems, to make it easier for us to keep systems up to date, etc. But there are certain mechanisms that we can put in place to help protect and secure those exposed surfaces. So from a simple perspective, doing IP allow listing based on the geographical areas or known IP spaces where people or administrators would be, authenticating to systems via RDP. This way, at least we know that there is an allow list that may be able to help and kind of block. Blocking accesses from associated VPNs, Tor nodes that are deemed to be high risk. So those are, simple but important. And then obviously for us, what we would always say here is enforcing MFA and complex password requirements. So it's, it is kind of a layered approach to cybersecurity, and the more obstacles we put in front of the cyber threat actor, then it's going to make it more difficult for them to achieve and kind of gain that initial access. And now I'm going to talk about something that I'm sure everybody who works in IT or in cybersecurity hears over and over again, which is unpatched vulnerabilities, or kind of vulnerability management. And I wanted to highlight 3 examples that kind of came up throughout the year, starting from the beginning of 2024 and to the end of 2024, that just highlight this critical aspect of cybersecurity that continues to impact organizations, and will continue to impact us as we go forward in 2025. So in February 2024, this was, I remember coming into the office and just, kind of waking up and hearing about this and coming in and kind of receiving a lot of calls about ConnectWise as the Screen Connect vulnerability. So this was discovered and observed in 2024, that the ConnectWise vulnerability. This impacted many organizations that use Screen Connect for remote system management. The vulnerability allowed cyber criminals to create their own administrative account on Screen Connect, on the Screen Connect servers, which then gave them full control. And as a result, if I get access to your Screen Connect server, then I could access all of the systems, or let's say if you're a provider and you manage a number of organizations, that I can access that. So what we saw here is what we sometimes see with these kind of vulnerabilities that are quickly discovered and are there is a use for them, is that threat actors kind of did what we call colloquially as a spray and pray attack. Is that they created accounts, saw what kind of stuck, and then came back to take advantage of those accounts. So in these cases, I would say they were hedging their bets that organizations were not going to take action quickly to then delete the accounts that were created, or kind of set up, confirm, ensure that the right monitoring in place, that they blocked threat actors accessing these accounts. But we saw quite a bit of that, and we really saw the gap, and kind of organizations struggled is that they didn't react to the vulnerability and the advertisement of it as quickly as they should have. The other one we're going to talk about, and the other two are, SonicWall and Fortinet. They're similar, I'll say, in terms of kind of their function, but just highlights the importance of, when we think sometimes of software updates and system updates, we may just think of our desktops and servers, but really these network devices are as critical. So the SonicWall flaw that was discovered last year, can be described as an improper access control vulnerability that would allow a threat actor without authentication to then, gain access to a device. This was released in August, and what we observed it throughout the fall is we saw kind of from the summer into the fall, organizations being compromised because of the SonicWall vulnerability, and that continued. So the key thing is, like, while it was known, while it was published, organizations were notified of it, we didn't react fast enough, and those organizations that didn't react fast enough were impacted, because it was, through this, a threat actor gains quick access. They get access to the critical systems, and then they were deploying ransomware. And we saw a number of threat actor groups take advantage of this vulnerability. It wasn't just one. So certainly kind of just showing that no matter what the complexity of the threat actor group, or how complex we think they are, they're really going to take advantage of the things that are easy for them. So the Fortinet vulnerability is the third vulnerability I'll talk about today. And again, allows remote code execution vulnerability. So the vulnerability allowed the threat actor to be able to execute commands on Fortinet devices with certain versions of specific components that were vulnerable. As a result, so the one thing that I wanted to highlight here is this was published in January, but really didn't observe it in kind of being used to conduct attacks till the fall. So by the time kind of there was they developed the code required to do that, or to be able to take advantage of or weaponize the vulnerability, that didn't happen till the fall. And that's what we're started to see to see the impact on organizations. Again, key aspect here is between January and fall, quite a few months would have passed, and just highlighting the importance of updating network level devices that may be patched less frequently than operating systems or software, but as critical to an organization's cybersecurity. Everything I talked about were observed in both MDR and in incident response cases. And what we look at in this perspective is, like, obviously patching is critical. It's a process. Cybersecurity is not just about technology. Cybersecurity is a bit of a process, and that is, how do we ensure, one, we're alerted of these issues and are addressing kind of critical vulnerabilities as quickly as possible. I completely understand with any organization that struggles with updating software updates or security updates or operating system updates. That is a challenge, but just kind of, I think it is as important because it does prevent and protect organizations. I just want to kind of highlight from a monitoring perspective what's important and what we do at Field Effect to kind of help clients in identifying these critical vulnerabilities that have been weaponized. Is when that does happen, we look at our security and threat intelligence efforts. Look at the, we follow what is being discovered, and then we look across the fleet to identify where we have clients or partners that may have these vulnerabilities and kind of alert them via the ARO process or our reporting process. And that is something to highlight here, so that to emphasize the importance of, while we monitor, we need to and report on it is important as important to action and kind of take action on those vulnerabilities when they are reported. And the one thing I want to kind of take as a small anecdote and highlight is that earlier this year in 2025, what we saw is that Cisco had to update a CVE that was published in 2014, because threat actors were now taking advantage of vulnerabilities that were reported in 2014. So 2014, now 11 years ago. And what we saw is that vulnerability had not been patched on many systems, on many networks, and threat actors were taking advantage of it now. So imagine having a vulnerability that's 10 years old that's on your systems. So just to kind of show that these vulnerabilities, when they're published, threat actors are still looking to take advantage of them, and it could be many years later. So now, if we look at from an emerging threats perspective, what are we seeing? What we suspect is, what we predict, I guess, or suspect is going to come in 2025, and how do we improve it? We think threat actors are going to continue to mirror technological advances. So as we advance cybersecurity techniques, as we advance controls, as technology advances, and they're going to mirror those advances to try to get through controls, but they're also going to use the same type of technological advances to help them in their own kind of goals. And so we're going to see more techniques, kind of continued refinement of techniques, and things like MFA protections. How do they continue to bypass MFA? So mentioned that earlier in the chat. That is going to continue as we go forward. We think that cybercrime as a service is going to continue to grow. This ranges from phishing as a service to ransomware as a service. So that is where threat actors are, kind of the threat actor or the cybercrime ecosystems. There are different players. And now we have threat actors who are just providing these as services. And what we're going to see more of is obviously attacks empowered by artificial intelligence. We're all using artificial intelligence to kind of help us in daily tasks, in business tasks. Threat actors are going to do the same thing, continue to take advantage of this new technology to allow them to advance their own techniques, their own, and to be able to achieve their goals faster and quicker, similar to what we want to do with that technology. From a protective mechanism, so this also is going to kind of align with what we talked about earlier. Employee cybersecurity training is really important, because we need to, employees, yes, we can talk about cybersecurity, but maybe a bit more about the types of attacks, the types of things that worry on organizations. What has an organization suffered from in the past? So obviously that is something to alert employees that we typically, see these types of attack. If you see these types of emails, do not take them seriously. If you see an email that you didn't expect, call that person, check with them, verify that you were expected to get something. AI policies and education, I think that is going to be a key aspect in terms of how we help employees also in that education process, and to be able to do more. We think realizing and educating employees that things like deep fakes and the use of AI to produce fake videos and audio, that is coming, and that is going to impact them, and something to be aware of, right? So AI-enabled phishing campaigns, those are also going to come. So just ensuring that our employees are aware of the types of threats that we may face in 2025 as AI technology continues to advance. And certainly, cybersecurity monitoring is critical for us from a field effect perspective. We're a cybersecurity company that believes in monitoring to help detect the threat in all of its phases. But that is a key aspect in helping organizations protect and move and ensure that they can react and prevent cyber threats from impacting them. So with that, I'm going to talk a bit about risk reduction. Risk reduction is it's not a one solution fits all. It is a journey, so it is, and it's also an infinite game. So cybersecurity is not a finite game. It is where it's something that we have to continuously work at. It's not something one solution fits all, quick deployment of something and then I'm secure. It is a process, and reducing risk is really about building resiliency, and we build that through preparation, having the ability to respond, having the ability to defend, and the ability to recover. So a lot of if we put a lot of emphasis in preparing and having the ability to respond and defend, hopefully we'll never get to the place where we have to worry about recovering. But that's, those are the key aspects that we want to prepare for an incident, respond to events that as they happen, defend against malicious actions, and recover from cybersecurity compromises, if and when they occur. And resiliency in that space is also not a one size fits all. So, organizations kind of want to look internally to see what are the risks that are impacting us, where are our risk tolerances, and how do we establish the right level of resiliency for where we are. But all of those things kind of highlight the importance of that cybersecurity journey and how we are continuously working at it. So, we talked a bit about this, navigating the journey. So how do I, as an organization, figure out what my journey is? Monitoring first is, if I have nothing in place, if you were to ask me, I will say, please put monitoring in place. At least this way, we're able to identify what's happening, detect it, and giving, as an organization, you'd be able to take action as a result of that monitoring. Identifying the risks and the mitigations. So this kind of goes back to detecting some of the cybersecurity gaps, if it is from exposed threat surface, if it is from out-of-date operating systems, software, etc. If it is from, seeing that, I have a risk from a user perspective because I don't have MFA, or I need to educate my users, or I need to kind of test and allow them to practice through some phishing campaigns. Those are some risks, and we can, kind of establish mitigations, prioritization, and implementing controls. Cybersecurity has many controls, ideally, that we'd like organizations to have, but we also know we have limited resources from a human, from a financial perspective. And so how do we then prioritizing those to kind of gain the most, or set up the most effective controls first, and kind of allowing that journey to continue, and certainly continuously improving. So as we talked about, technology improves, cybersecurity or cyber threats improve, cyber criminal capability improves. So how do we continuously improve that? So it just, I wish I could say it's easy, take this pill, it's going to fix it all. That is not the reality. And I think that is something we need to face and be aware of as for cybersecurity providers and as organizations. So, kind of highlighting here, defense in depth is a great approach to look at it, and to think about cybersecurity as a journey that impacts people, policies, and technology. While technology is a key aspect, people and policies and processes are important. And thinking about anything from cybersecurity training to email protections to monitoring, all of that is part of that process, and that allows us to react and detect in the right way. And with that, I think that kind of takes us to the end. So happy to take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Monique, for taking us through all of that. And so question for you, Monique. You spoke about risk management, so I think this is probably tied to that. How can I open the risk management conversation with a client without making it seem like we've been completely missing something? I guess that's as an MSP, positioned as an MSP serving a client.
Yeah, so I think it is about educating clients about cybersecurity. So really kind of going back to the basics, right? Is that what is cybersecurity? Why is cybersecurity important to you? And how do we kind of just say, something that we always talk about is that cybersecurity is a journey that is evolving and that we need to evolve. One, not because just, as technology evolves, the threats evolve, everything else evolves with it. So it is about kind of educating them about that evolution, educating them about the fact that cybersecurity is not just technology, it is more than that. And then how do we then kind of look at it, if we look at it from a risk, like what is the risk for your organizations? And a lot of it, maybe some organizations may not know really the risks they're facing because we know it because we read about risks in the health sector, so we know what happens in them, but maybe they don't, or maybe there's a certain kind of market segment that doesn't know or doesn't think it's going to happen to them. But it's also kind of bringing in and being honest. Look, we have small clients who are impacted. Cyber criminals do not discriminate. I use that all the time. They do not discriminate. And just kind of showing them what you see in your other with your other clients and some of the threats they're facing, and how how can we help you not react to those threats. So that would be kind of how I would approach it.
Another one here. What is the largest threat discovered associated with utilizing telecom-based authentication methods?
Oh, telecom-based authentication methods. I don't know what that specifically means by telecom-based authentication methods. So if we were to, if I were to think about kind of maybe backbone networks, maybe that's what we're thinking about?
Like 2FA. So I'm thinking it's probably like when I get my 2FA message and it comes to my phone as like an SMS.
I think bypassing MFA, right? So if I'm getting it, so I would look about the MFA implementation. So we at Field Effect, we don't like SMS-based MFA. Definitely recommend kind of something more secure authenticator apps. Certainly that technology and kind of MFA technology is improving from, you could look at hardware kind of solutions that kind of provide that. So that is one aspect. Certainly from an SMS perspective, it is probably the least secure. Email, less secure. So authentication applications are, authenticator, or those are the better solutions. And then if the risk is quite high, then you kind of want to look at kind of changes into something like a hardware solution that allows that and provides it. So there's a number of other things that we could look at to that kind of prevent and remove that threat that may be caused by the weaker kind of multi-factor or 2FA solutions.
Okay, we got a thanks in the chat. So I think that answered the question. Okay, next one up here. Why do you think the top vulnerabilities, patching and email, continue to be the top vectors for compromise despite them being highlighted year after year?
Yeah, so so email is easy because it's
easy
easy
question,
to
by the way.
Yeah, that is a great question. I mean, I wish we could say they stop being a threat year after year, but that is not the case. The data shows us that. I think email is easy because humans are easy to fool. Simple, right? We may not be paranoid enough. If you work in cybersecurity, then you are over paranoid, maybe. But if you don't, you just don't realize kind of the impact, or you may think it's, this looks legitimate. Of course, Chloe sent me that email. She sent me that gift certificate that I want to get. So I think it's part of it is, kind of laziness of the human, maybe lack of education. Also, the one thing we do see is MFA fatigue. Threat actors do take advantage of that, where they continue to, we've seen that in attacks, they'll continue to kind of hammer the user to then just say yes. So really, I think it's just the fact that us as humans tend to fall for that. And I do think they're going to get more complex kind of email compromises because of AI. The other questions was about patching. Patching is, the processes are complex and difficult. And if you're looking at, even a small organization, okay, then, there's an impact to daily functions, to business. We're going to have to take these servers offline to do this, or these systems. So it's kind of coming up with a process to do that. And also the thing with patching is that the number of security patches or security updates that happen. So it is a challenge, I think, for many organizations to keep up with that kind of with the volumes that are coming in and kind of coming up with the right thing. So really what we recommend is that, and kind of looking at controls. Okay, what is my external threat surface? So focusing on patching those systems first, within 24 hours of a vulnerability being released. Your critical systems that are internal, again, within 24 hours of release, and then the rest of the network. So kind of, how do we then, look at it from a solutions perspective? How do I prioritize? What are my key threats? And how do I prioritize that? They're continue to happening because humans produce software, and software has vulnerabilities. I'm trying to see if there's another part of that. Lack of budgets, maybe. I think it's just also organizations and resources is an impact. IT. IT teams are small. They have a lot being demanded of them. That also plays an impact. So again, it goes back to organization understanding the risk of cybersecurity and prioritizing the the work that needs to be done by our organization based on that risk and the threats they're facing.
So, Monique, since MDR solutions are being implemented in most environments now, threat actors have been leveraging IoT. So, for example, things like webcams, smart appliances, to deploy ransomware. Has Field Effect seen this type of behavior, and what are the best defenses against it?
From an MDR from an IR perspective, we haven't we haven't seen a lot of that from an where I'm heavily involved, and from an MDR perspective, I'll have to kind of get back to you on that. I'll be honest, I don't think we have to the point where it is we've seen it, but we'd have to check. Kind of the best defense against those attack paths. I know there's an article that's posted here, but it is so similar. Those webcams are vulnerable, right? And it is these IoT systems that I think IoT systems are probably, their threat actors may take more advantage of them. They're similar systems, just like any other IT systems. They have their they have their vulnerabilities. They're considered not to be considered a way into a network, or to be used kind of in the typical attack. So I think it's similar, is that we have to look at what are, if threat actors are taking advantage of a vulnerability in that IoT system, then how do we update those systems? How do we it's the same, I'll say it's the same story, but within a different kind of technology space. But it is about making sure those systems are updated, those systems are secure, and ensuring that, and then also it becomes about kind of that network configuration. How are your IoT systems managed? And are they linked to your IT network or to the network that has your critical information? So it's a bit about kind of looking at that kind of, if we go back to the defense in depth and about network design, is that how do we then look at how are these systems connected to the systems that are considered are most critical to my network. And so there's a bit of that I would say is important for organization to look at. That would be kind of my recommendation.
We have one last question here. What do you recommend to save passwords and keep them safe?
Oh, I'll say a password manager is quick, easy. We use it here. I use it at home for my own stuff. So pretty easy to set up. I feel the fact that I have to remember 2 passwords. That's it. And then everything else, I use the password manager to remember. One, it allows me to remember. Second, it allows me to develop complex passwords. And this way I don't have to worry about it. So that would be it. There are lots of solutions that are available for organizations.
I have another one here. Thank you for your questions, folks, by the way. Have you found that utilizing different network technologies, such as blockchain, helps at all?
Helps from a cybersecurity perspective. I haven't. I'll be honest. I haven't. I wouldn't say that utilizing those different network technologies does help. I think as we use more of that technology, the threat actors are going to kind of look into that technology to take advantage of it, right? Like there is a financial gain here, and threat actor groups or ransomware groups run as a business. They hire employees. These employees have emails. They function as a business. They get vacation. So I think as technology changes or as we use more of certain things, it may present some difficulty at the beginning, but that will likely continue to be, threat actors are going to look to take advantage of whatever technology we use.
Well, I think that's it for questions. Monique, thank you so much for running us through that. And thank you all for joining us today for the live session and for your questions and your engagement. Please feel free to share with anybody you think would find this useful. And until next time, see you around.